Hello class, in this video we are going to discuss the long-awaited five-factor model. Okay, the five-factor model of personality, which has a very important place in the history of the study of personality. You see, before the five-factor model, a lot of personality psychologists couldn't agree on anything. They couldn't agree on the specific number of traits. They couldn't agree on what traits were important. And some social psychologists and some other psychologists criticized the field of personality, that no one could agree on anything, that there wasn't anything useful that was coming out from the study of personality. And within that whole debacle, in the 1980s, this model was proposed that there are 5 personality traits, and they are found in all sorts of different situations. They're found in this situation, they're found in that situation. It doesn't matter what data set we look at. If we conduct a factor analysis on the data in the same way, we keep finding the same 5 factors. So that left the discipline of personality psychology with at least one thing that most personality psychologists could agree on. So it comes at a very critical moment in the history of personality psychology. It's a very important model, and everything in personality since this model has been pretty much a reaction for the five-factor model or against the five-factor model or modifications of the five-factor model. So it's important that we know what this is. So what is the five-factor model? Sometimes it's called the Big Five personality traits. All it typically says, all it really says is there are 5 personality traits. That's not very much of a theory, right? It's not very much of a theory compared to the likes of Freud's theory or Jung's theory, which they have some kind of idea about how these personality traits develop, why people differ in the way that they do. The five-factor model is more of a taxonomy. All right, think of taxonomies that you might have learned, like in biology, for instance: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. I believe that's correct, or maybe I always switch like order and family around, but you get what I'm saying. That's a taxonomy. All right, it just describes which species are similar to one another. All right. This is similar in personality. We're not explaining how these traits come into being. We're not explaining what these traits are related to. We just say that there are 5 of them. Okay. In fact, some psychologists can't even agree on what the names of these traits are. So so it's more of a taxonomy than it is a theory. All right. It's more of a classification system than a idea about how these traits come into being and why they come into being and what are the major motivating forces behind these traits. All right, as I mentioned before, the research on the five-factor model came at an important period of time in which personality psychologists were questioning the usefulness of personality. Is it even a useful discipline? So, unlike psychodynamic theory, the five-factor model is associated with a variety of names. Okay, the individual that really made it famous was Louis Goldberg. Louis Goldberg was not the first person to discover these 5 factors, but he's the person that coined the term the Big Five. So typically we associate the five-factor model with Louis Goldberg. And we'll talk about some of his research. You'll read a paper by him. He has a wonderful way of writing. He's quite sassy in the way that he writes some things, so I hope that you enjoy the paper that I'm getting you to read by him. The other 2 that are less known for, I mean, many times people associate the five-factor model with Costa and McCrae. So Bob McCrae, Paul Costa. These are individuals that came really late to the five-factor model, but they developed the first commercial test for the five-factor model, which is called the NEO Personality Inventory. And in fact, if we were to have had this class in person, I have copies of, well, I don't have copies, the department has copies of the NEO Personality Inventory, in which you would have taken the over 200 questions and calculated your score. But of course, we can't do that because I can't physically hand things out to you. So they created this test, and if you come up with the first commercialized test for a theory, many people are going to use that test, so it's a great way of making money. It's also a great way of getting your name out there. So Costa McCrae have provided some evidence for the five-factor model, but they're really known for creating the first major test personality questionnaire for the five-factor model. So these are some individuals that are typically associated with this five-factor model. So what are the five factors? All right. The first one is extroversion. All right. Oh, extroversion. This is something that we've encountered again and again and again. All right. So we'll talk a little bit more in detail about what is actually in this trait, but think about it as whether or not someone's talkative, outspoken, assertive versus shy, submissive, inhibited. So it just doesn't have to do with, do you like to be out and about in crowds of people? It also has to do with dominance. Are you a more dominant person compared to a more submissive person? Okay. These factors, these traits go by a number of different names. This one is typically called extroversion, but if we want to be specific and don't use a label, sometimes researchers will refer to this trait as Roman numeral 1, because when we do factor analysis, this is the first factor that we find. It's the factor, the trait that accounts for the most variation in people's personalities. Okay, so we're going to go in order of the trait that accounts for the most variability in people's personalities, then the second, third, fourth, fifth. Second, agreeableness, something we've talked about before. So how kind, warm, sincere a person is compared to how harsh, cruel, and sympathetic they are. Okay, also think about how polite someone is versus not polite. This is what agreeableness is all about. And again, we're going to go into these traits in a whole lot more detail. This is the second one that we find. Conscientiousness. I told you that this one was going to be important. So how organized, orderly, and prompt someone is, how hardworking they are versus how sloppy, disorganized, and careless they are. This does not have to do with how thoughtful someone is. All right, when we refer to someone as conscientious, that is not the same thing as conscientiousness. I know it is confusing, but don't make that mistake when you're trying to interpret someone's conscientiousness. How hardworking, how organized that person is. That's what conscientiousness has to do with. Factor number 4, neuroticism. Notice that extroversion and neuroticism are two of the same traits that Hans Eysenck proposed. And in fact, these names come directly from Hans Eysenck's model of personality. So neuroticism, how moody, anxious, and insecure someone is versus if they are calm, relaxed, and stable. All right, this is number 4. It accounts for the fourth amount of variation in someone's personality. Now, the last one is the one that is going to be problematic for us because some people are going to be able to find this trait, some people are not going to find this trait. This one also is the one that varies in terms of what the name is. Some people call this trait openness to experience. Some people call this trait culture. Some people call this trait intellect. It goes by a variety of different names and has some different ways in which people go about measuring it. So I want you to be mindful of this. Okay, openness to experience. This is how intellectual, artistic, imaginative you are versus how uncreative, boorish, which means not very creative, kind of liking basic things, versus simple. Okay, so high openness to experience. You like things that are more intellectual, artistic. You're more likely to try new things versus uncreative. You like simple things. You're a basic bitch. Okay. I guess I can curse on YouTube, but rather not. I don't want to get the video taken down. All right. So these are the traits. The naming conventions of these come directly from the NEO personality inventory because that test is so famous, because so many people have used it. The names of these traits come from Costa and McCrae, which in one way is a good thing because we call these traits typically by these names, but in other ways it's bad. All right, because openness to experience doesn't do the best job of capturing what this trait is all about. Neuroticism sometimes goes by another name too, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that here in a bit. Let's one way to remember this that you probably learned in general psychology, you can either think of the acronym OCEAN or the acronym CANOE. All right, openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. It's fairly straightforward if you need one of those acronyms, but hopefully by the end of this class, you will not need any of those acronyms. You will have these traits cemented in your mind, because we're going to be talking a lot about these traits from here until the end of the course. All right, so extroversion. What is extroversion all about? Extroversion is related to how socially engaged someone is. Do they like social interactions, or do they prefer interactions which they are not very, they're not engaged socially? As I mentioned a few times, being extroverted or being introverted doesn't mean that you necessarily hate social situations. All right, you might enjoy social situations. It's just that it's more tiring for you, and you might need some downtime to recover from a party or some other kind of social situations. Extroverts are more likely to assume leadership positions. Introverts are more likely to shy away from leadership positions. This doesn't necessarily mean that introverts are bad leaders. They just don't typically assume them. They don't typically go out of their way to get leadership positions. Extroverts are more likely to take chances in romantic relationships. They're more likely to ask people out on dates. Interesting relationship that we'll see now and we'll see again and again and again. Extroverts report being happier in their life compared to people that are more introverted. We can even see these with this finding with brain studies, so neuroimaging studies, in which extroverts, we see more activity in the happiness regions of their brain when they're processing happy images, happy pictures, compared to people that are more introverted. Okay. Extroverts also show more commitment to their work, to their working organization. There are some downsides to extroversion. It's not all great, amazing things. Extroverts tend to drive fast. They're more likely to get into traffic accidents. They're more likely to be distracted while they drive. So they're more likely to be a little bit risky compared to people that are more introverted. So that's a good overview of what extroversion is. Again, remember, also has to do with dominance. Kind of person that likes to take charge, likes to give out orders, compared to someone that prefers not to really give orders, but would prefer to take orders. All right, agreeableness. Okay, agreeableness, these are individuals, people that score high in agreeableness are individuals that like to get along with everybody. They don't like fighting. They are going to try to smooth out any potential arguments. They would prefer to resolve conflicts. The people low in agreeableness don't really care if they get in a fight. They don't care about yelling and screaming, and they're perfectly fine with that. So for instance, if you go to Walmart and you see someone that's making a scene and they don't care, you know, they're going to make sure that they get their money back, that's someone that's probably lower in agreeableness. Whereas let's say that you go to a drive-through and someone forgot to include your order of fries, or forgot some packets of ketchup. Someone that's high in agreeableness might be like, I don't want to go back. I don't want that fuss. That's a potentially awkward situation. I'm just going to move on and deal with not having these packets of ketchup. Whereas someone that's low in agreeableness doesn't find that aversive. Conflict for them doesn't bother them, so they don't mind yelling at people. It doesn't have to necessarily be yelling, though. They would not mind correcting someone. It doesn't bother them. All right. People that are high in agreeableness are more likely to withdraw from social conflict. If there's fighting, if there is a situation in which like there might be some debates, they would prefer to stay out of it. They would not like to debate. They would not like to get into arguments. People that are higher in agreeableness tend to be victimized less by bullies. All right. If bullies are picking on someone, someone that's high in agreeableness knows what they're doing that's causing them to be bullied, so they're just likely to change their behavior or change some aspect of whatever it is that's causing them to be bullied, whereas someone that's low in agreeableness doesn't necessarily think about that and is more likely to be bullied. Think about being high in agreeableness. You understand the emotions and thought processes of other people. All right, you're able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. You understand why they think the way that they do. And it's a good personality trait to have because you know how to behave socially if you understand why someone thinks the way that they do. So people low in agreeableness are going to keep doing the same thing and get bullied by it, and they don't really realize why it is the case that they're being bullied. Traditionally, people that are very persuasive, traditionally people that end up being politicians, tend to score higher in agreeableness. All right, knowing the right things to say, knowing things that will make people be at ease when you are around. All right, so agreeableness has to do with empathy, being able to experience other people's emotions. There we go. had it next. Agreeableness is related to a person's empathy. All right, people high in agreeableness are more likely to forgive other people. They understand why people behave the way that they do, compared to someone that's low in agreeableness, likely to hold grudges for a long period of time. All right. The opposite end of agreeableness is aggressiveness. All right. People low in agreeableness are more likely to yell, more likely to slam doors, more likely to hit other people, get into arguments, get into fights, and to be intentionally rude. All right. So agreeableness, if you're high in it, you're more likely to be polite, you're more likely to say the right things, you care about the opinions other people have of you. Whereas if you're low in agreeableness, it doesn't matter. You want to get your way, and you don't necessarily think about the emotions of other people when you perform your actions. All right, conscientiousness has to do with how hardworking and industrious a person is. People high in conscientiousness are going to be reliable workers. They're more likely to show up on time, and they typically do well in the workplace, and they do well in school. All right, people that score high in conscientiousness are going to report higher job satisfaction. Conscientiousness is one of the best predictors of job satisfaction. Do you enjoy your job? Well, if you're a hard worker, everybody at your job likes you. Your job is a big part of who you are. You're more likely to like it. People high in conscientiousness are typically going to do better at their jobs. They are going to have greater job security. And they are going to have some better relationships with other people. All right, they're going to be more likely to be committed in their relationships, less likely to cheat in their relationships. Conscientiousness has a lot to do with self-control. We'll see that the brain areas responsible for self-control are also responsible for variation in conscientiousness. So why is conscientiousness related to so many positive outcomes? Two major reasons. One, someone that's high in conscientiousness is less likely to procrastinate. They're likely to get things done early. Again, they're better at self-control. They know if I get this done now, I won't have to worry about the future. And that's going to make life a whole lot easier for me. All right. And if you don't procrastinate, and let's say it takes more time than what you were actually planning on spending, well, then you've got that extra time. Compared to if you tried it 2 hours before something is due and you don't have enough time, well, you are SOL. Also, people high in conscientiousness are more likely to spend more time getting the task done. So it's likely to have been performed in a way that is of higher quality. Conscientiousness is also related to a wide variety of health outcomes. We'll talk a little bit about this later on in this class, but people, when they get into their 30s, if they're low in conscientiousness, they're more likely to put on weight. Okay, people that are high in conscientiousness are more likely to stick to their diets. They're more likely to stick to their exercise plan. People high in conscientiousness are more likely to do things like brush their teeth every day, to floss. Anything that we could think of having to do with self-control, people high in conscientiousness are more likely to be capable of. Also, conscientiousness is related to condom usage, the practice of safe sex, and the number of times someone has been arrested. All right, if you're low in conscientiousness, you're more likely to be arrested. All right, neuroticism. I gave this example a little bit early on, but the same emotion-causing event is going to impact someone of higher neuroticism for a longer period of time than someone that is of lower neuroticism. My wife and I recently got Disney Plus, and I watched Toy Story 4 for the first time. And you know, the Toy Story films, at least recently, they tug on your heartstrings. heartstrings. There we go. So if I am of low neuroticism, I'm going to get upset about Toy Story 4, but then afterwards I'm going to be fine. Okay, I leave the tears at the end of the movie and I go on about my daily life. Whereas if I'm higher neuroticism, I'm likely to cry at Toy Story, and then throughout the rest of my day, I'm going to constantly think about the film and continue being upset for a longer period of time. It's a dumb example, but it's in this, but in the similar vein, the death of a loved one, a humiliating experience, all right, a poor grade on the test, someone that's of low neuroticism thinks about it then and there and then forgets about it and moves on. Someone high in neuroticism is going to think about it for a wide variety of time, a large period of time, a long period of time. There we go. The hallmark of neuroticism is mood variability. They feel really good one day, feel really bad the next, and throughout the day there's a lot of fluctuations. People that are high in neuroticism experience more strong negative emotions. All right. Neurotic individuals experience more fatigue throughout the day. They become emotionally exhausted. They experience more grief and depression after death of a loved one. Neuroticism is also correlated with a wide variety of mental health outcomes. People that are high in neuroticism are more likely to suffer from an anxiety disorder, a mood disorder, more likely to have suicidal ideation where they think about committing suicide. Neuroticism, as you can imagine, has correlated with a wide variety of poor health outcomes. People that are higher neuroticism are going to have poor blood pressure. They're going to experience more illness, more likely to get sick, and they are going to not go to the doctor as much. They're not going to follow through with a lot of those pro-health activities that humans should be engaging in to make sure that they are healthy. Neuroticism is related to anxiety felt in social relationships, especially with sexual relationships. People high in neuroticism are more likely to worry about their sexual performance. They worry about anxiety, or they're worrying about sexual performance. They're worried about engaging in sex. They are going to suffer with their interpersonal relationships because they're always in their head about interpersonal relationships. Is this person talking about me behind my back? Or did I say the wrong thing yesterday? They're constantly going to be worried about that, and in such a way, it's going to hurt their social relationships. After a traumatic event, people that score higher in neuroticism are more likely to develop post-traumatic stress disorder. This is an interesting relationship. Okay, I mean, if a traumatic experience is extreme, pretty much everybody would experience post-traumatic stress disorder. But let's say a moderate stressor, a moderate traumatic event, if there is such a thing. People higher in neuroticism are more likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder than someone that's lower of neuroticism. Another important thing about neuroticism is that people high in neuroticism are more likely to self-handicap. Self-handicapping is a topic of conversation in social psychology. Self-handicapping is the behavior in which if someone's worried about their performance of something and they're worried that people will think badly of them if they don't succeed on something, generate excuses, generate obstacles that they put in their path so that if they fail, then they have an excuse about why they failed, and other people cannot judge them for being poor at something. So let's say that someone's worried about their test grade, and if they do poorly on the test, then people are going to think that they're stupid, and they don't want to be stupid. So what they do the night before, they don't spend any time studying, they don't spend any time sleeping, they drink alcohol the entire time, and then of course they're going to do poor on the test. But then when someone says, why did you do poor on the test? They say, well, I spent the last night drinking the entire time and I didn't study at all. Well, that person can't judge you as being dumb in that situation. So you've got an excuse. All right, your self-esteem can be protected in this regard. You might not have to feel bad about yourself if you fail because you have an excuse already planned. How about if you play sports and you are going to be up against a very difficult team the next day. Well, again, you might do something similar where you don't practice, you don't train, you spend the entire night beforehand drinking, and then if you perform poorly, then you have an excuse. Okay, a very toxic behavior to engage in. Okay, actively putting obstacles in your way to impede your success only so that you can feel good about yourself afterwards. That's not a very good behavior, but people higher in neuroticism are more likely to self-handicap. Last trait, openness to experience. Openness to experience has been thought of in a variety of different ways. One way to look at openness to experience is people that like to try new things, all right? And openness to experience is correlated with this. So openness to experience is related to whether or not someone likes to try different foods, to visit different countries, just enjoying new experiences overall. Another way of looking at openness to experience is more in the line of the definition of intellect or culture. What does someone enjoy for fun, right? So how about going to the opera as opposed to watching reality TV? We might think of an opera as more cultured versus reality TV as less cultured. This is another way of looking at openness to experience. And both of these conceptualizations of openness to experience are correct, and both of them are correlated with one another. So do you enjoy high culture versus low culture, whatever that might be? Or are you open to try new things versus not open to try new things? Both of these go into the trait of openness to experience. All right. Openness to experience is related to sexual experimentation. All right. Whether or not someone is likely to engage in an extramarital affair, not necessarily cheating on their spouse, but wanting to bring someone new into the relationship. Openness to experience is related to this. All right. How about artistic endeavors? People that score higher in openness to experience are going to process art a lot differently. They're going to perceive different things in art in its many, many forms compared to someone that is low in openness to experience. We can think of this personality trait as being correlated with creativity. People that are high in openness to experience view the world in a very different way than other people. Openness to experience is negatively related to racism, sexism, prejudice against a variety of minority groups. So if you're higher in openness to experience, you're less likely to be prejudiced against minority groups. Also, openness to experience is correlated with people more likely to get tattoos, people more likely to get body piercings. I wonder if this relationship still holds as tattoos become more and more popular. I imagine that 30 years ago, where tattoos were not as normal as they are today, openness to experience would be related to who gets tattoos and who doesn't. But if everybody gets tattoos now, it's a whole lot less socially taboo. I wonder if that relationship still holds. All right, but at least when this research was initially conducted, tattoos and body piercings correlated with openness to experience. All right, so we're going to spend a lot of time with the 5-factor model. Let's stop this lecture right now. In the discussion post, I'm going to get you to evaluate the big 5 for a variety of important TV characters, movie stars. What do you think these 5 personality traits are correlated with outcome-wise? So to give you some more practice with this. All right, well, have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.